Welcome enough. Welcome, you. How are you?
Good, on yourself?
Hey, great. Welcome. Just wait for the whole gang to be there. Hey, Terry, welcome. We've got Yubo in class today, and this will be
hello everyone.
This will be our last one on individuality and style. And the next topic which we're going to deal with is tactical complications. So most of you, I think, will probably enjoy that also. Yubo, do you know a chess player called Schlechter?
Karl Schlechter.
Yeah.
He's got a variation in the Slav defense named after him. I think he played Lasker in one of the World Championship matches, but then there was some controversy where he was a gentleman, let's say, after Lasker made a mistake, and then he gave it back a piece. I'm not sure if it's a piece or time or something. I think there's one tournament where his opponent arrived late.
Uh-huh.
And then once his opponent made his move, he let his clock run down so he had the same time as his opponent. Apparently is a big gentleman.
Yeah, nowadays you don't find them like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So welcome everyone. Yubo, I've sent you the game, and the game we're going to look at is game number 5 of their match for the World Championship. And Schlechter, being a gentleman, was actually very gifted in chess, and Lasker had the reputation of being more like a psychologist at play than a chess player. And I think it was probably also kind of a misguided understanding of how he played. I'm not so. When you look at this game, I'm not so convinced that it was just purely psychology. So anyway, the game is game number 5. So it went e4, e5. knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. So this is the Ruy Lopez, and the Lasker goes knight f6, castles, and the d6. So nowadays here you see a lot of this move, knight e4, and it's usually met by d4, and usually black goes knight d6, attacking the bishop, which forces this take, and a lot of people approach this ending thinking it's easy to play, but in practice it's actually not as simple as it looks. In fact, black scores very well around in this position. So another way which seems natural to play after knight e4 is rook e1, but I think again after knight d6, knight here, bishop e7, black is doing fine in most cases. Now the bishop is really under attack, so they normally go something like bishop f1 with a complex position after knight takes, rook takes, and castles there. Okay, so this would be black doesn't mind playing this. He's going to develop bishop f6, pushing the rook backwards to e3 or to de1, and he's going to play knight f5, and he's going to play d5. The position is really easy for black to play. But after castles, Lasker plays this move d6, which is very restrictive. A lot, knowing that Lasker was comfortable in playing even drawn positions or positions where he had to defend, he was one of the best defenders the world had seen actually. So playing these passive positions didn't bother him, and this is where sometimes certain things might not make sense to you from a truly objective viewpoint of chess. Yeah. But to that person it makes sense because it fits the way they play. Are you with me?
Yeah.
So by playing d6,
yeah.
d4, bishop d7, knight c3, bishop e7. If you feel there's something I missed that you might need explanation on, just stop me, all right?
Yes, coach.
And after bishop g5, castles, pawn takes on e5. And this is the start of a long series of exchanges, which black is hardly more opening difficulties. And after pawn takes e5, knight takes e5, to allow more exchanges, bishop takes d7, knight f d7, bishop takes, knight takes on f3 check, queen f3, queen e7, and here we reach this position and it's white's turn to play. What would you do?
So the queen looks slightly misplaced, but it's not terrible at the moment. The rook on a1's probably doing the least, so rook ae1 are the first two moves that come to mind.
Okay.
Black's worst placed piece, I'd argue it's between the knight and the a8 rook.
Okay.
So if there's any squares those two want to go to, the knight probably wants to go to, let's say, e5 or c5. F6 works as well, like any one of those squares could work. And you don't really have too much you can do in the way of preventing that. Also, another move like knight d5, which would be attacking the queen, that could probably force queen d8, or at least, okay, no, if knight d5 would force queen d8. And if black wanted to kick it away, he'd have to exchange the knight, or play c6, which would weaken d6. So it's probably like rook a d1, rook a e1, or knight d5.
Okay, so there's
Like
a
those are probably the
lesson
three I'd look at.
in the way you are battling between these two ideas and which one to go first. Now, in there lies a very important lesson. Which one do you choose? You've got rook a d1, you've got knight d5. These seem like all valid moves. So now, over the board, your struggle is like, so which one do I apply? So how do you differentiate which one you use?
So if we look at that if white's knight either going to b6 or f6, although f6 looks nicer.
You mean black's knight?
It's just closer to the king. Yeah, black's knight going to f6, then it'll defend d5. And so black, instead of having to play c6 to get rid of the knight, can just exchange.
Okay.
So looking at that, black can defend d5. If I move one of the rooks instead, then black can play knight f6, and then d5 would be defended.
Okay.
So then knight d5 after, basically moving one of the rooks, then black gets a little bit more time to move his knight around. So knight d5 first would probably
but what is the
be my
principle
choice.
that you use to play knight d5? That's what's important, because if you understand that, in the future it won't even be a debate in your mind.
You gain time, you improve a piece. Otherwise, if you spend your move somewhere else, you don't gain as much from it.
Okay, now the principle is a principle we've never spoken about a lot. It's called the principle of attack. It just means that if you've got two moves, the one which you take priority on is one which attacks. Right? So you've got rook a e1 or rook a d1, both of these improve a position, right? They improve your worst placed piece. But if you've got two moves, the one which attacks takes priority. In other words, you look at forcing moves first. And knight d5 is a forcing move. That's really the simplicity of it.
Okay.
So, and you see, knight d5, very important because he's only got one move. That's why it's a forcing move. Now, if you delay this, right, and you play, let's say, rook a d1 or you play rook a e1, which are not blunders. What he does is that he plays rook a d8 or rook a e8, sorry. And now, even if you play knight d5, the queen is going to a good square. You can even play queen e5. Attacking, it's not going to go backwards, right? And if you take, what's he going to do? He's going to just play rook c8, and he's getting more activity out of this setup than you are. And you get one of those pawns again. So this scenario, making this decision is very easy for white because knight d5 actually cuts out the communication between the two rooks. If you recall, in the opening, we were saying you must develop your minor pieces, you must castle, you must connect your rooks. So if you play knight d5 now, you're actually cutting out that communication, right? So, and it's a move that he has to respond with care. And here, Lasker makes a mistake. He goes queen d8. What was the better move? And what principle would he be using to make that move?
So knight c7, it gives up a pawn. Like knight c7, you can play. Knight c7 doesn't fork the rooks as it might do in some positions. So worrying about knight c7 doesn't make too much sense if rook c8 will just win back the pawn.
Exactly. So knight c7 is not really a threat. Right?
Yeah.
So black had time to do something. And the principle you'll be using is principle of maximum activity. If you've got two moves, one has got less activity, one has got more activity, but they pretty much accomplish the same thing, the one with more activity takes more precedence.
Okay, so looking at what you mentioned about with the previous moves, I think like Queen E5 looks quite useful.
Very good. Queen E5 comes with a tempo, it is B2. So now taking on C7, which looks obvious, is just going to activate black more. And now after Rook D5, Knight Rook C2, black is the one who's actually causing stuff. E4 is very weak, Knight C5 can be played B2 or A2 4. Possibly.
Scratch.
Okay. So I find that these small decision processes are the difference between a good player and a player who struggles. So Queen D8, Rook A D1. Again, now you see this Rook Queen is on the square, he makes it uncomfortable. And he takes the least active piece, the Rook on A1, and he makes it more active. Rook E8, Rook F E1, Knight to B6. Critical moment, what do you do?
I think there's a Tarash quote like a knight is worst placed on B6 or something, or something along those lines.
And there is a reason
for
that.
I'm tempted to leave it there. Knight E3 looks quite interesting. Kind of restricts D5 from black, but then your queen is still like your queen kind of has to watch over the E4 pawn after that.
Correct. I like this idea. Knight E3 with the idea of going to F5. The knight on B6 is worst placed. The thing to remember about positions where a knight is on B6 is you must always play B3.
Yeah.
Cutting out advanced outposts for that knight. So here, look at knight B6. Now, selector plays a queen to C3, which is not the best of moves. Of course, these two knights are not the same, so black changes. Knight takes D5. And here, what do you do? How do you recapture?
Okay, so with the allows a few more exchanges, which is it doesn't make your position any better or obviously any better or any worse. Whereas rook takes D5, like then the rook's it's just on a bit of a better square. The C6 to kick it away, or rook E5. There seems to be a bit more to do. I'd probably take with the rook.
Very good. Well done, enough. Rook takes D5. It makes a lot of sense. You can play this E5 as a threat. There's potential weaknesses. There's not much in this position, but it's a position you need to learn to play, right? Black goes rook E6, rook D3, Queen E7, putting pressure on this pawn. And here, what do you do?
You can play rook G3 for free, but what I can't. I'm not too sure what to do after that. You can play like rook G3, F3, but then D5. E3 looks interesting, but you're gonna have to defend your E4 pawn at some point. Plus, since the rook on E1's only defended once, then like something like F5 or D5 look quite annoying. So rook G3 looks nice, but F5 or D5, once black defends the mate threat, then F5 or D5 look annoying. And also black can get a third piece to the E file, so I feel like going for rook G3, it's just it's a short-term threat. It doesn't do too much.
Okay, so there's something that I'm observing about the way you choose your moves. you look at a move that you like and you've seen and you analyze it. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Who in the chat or even you notices the problem there?
It's possible I discard moves too quickly. I don't always take stock. Sometimes I'll just look at, like, I think I've looked at a little bit of like programming chess engines named like not quiet moves, or like basically attacking moves, and also sometimes, yeah, if I don't like look at it, if I just look at it a calculation where I might not focus onto the right things immediately, and it can take a bit longer, and sometimes I can miss the right things to focus on entirely. Whereas looking at like slowly, okay, what are black's advantages, plans, and so on versus white's, it'll help me to focus in the right direction a bit more.
Okay, so I mean, first of all, I think you think a lot. It's not a problem. That's the problem is that you do actually think a lot, but you're doing it. It's like you're piling a lot onto your mind when it doesn't have to. When you are analyzing, when it comes to choosing variations, the first thing you need to do mentally is to identify what are your candidate moves. Once you bring that order, a lot of the chaos really disappears, right? So you could say Rook G3 is move number 1. You could say maybe Rook E3 is number 2. You could say F3 is number 4. Do you get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you start looking at the most forcing, right? You start looking at the most...
Rook G3 for...
Exactly.
Sorry.
Right? So before going into the calculation, you identify the moves that you're going to look at. The reason why you look at the most forcing is what?
It limits your opponent's responses.
Limits your opponent's responses, and if it's truly forcing, you might not even have to look at the other two candidates if this one gives you a win.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I understand.
So even if we didn't know the feather, so some people don't calculate well. They just don't waste time on things that don't need to be thought about. So a strong player here, seeing Rook G3, Rook E3, and F3, his first choice would be Rook G3 because it's an attacking move.
Yeah.
Okay. So like these kind of things, if you can really like dig into them. Hey, Frappuccino, welcome. If you can dig into those things, you'll be surprised how it changes the way you treat positions. So Rook G3, and here, the other thing with forcing moves is they force your opponent to do something wrong. Are you with me?
Yeah.
After Rook G3, Black goes Rook G6.
I don't understand this. Surely there's a better way to defend than Rook G6.
Okay.
Not that it's a bad way to defend.
So which one were you thinking? Because when you calculate the forcing moves, you have to look at all the defenses.
Okay, well, F6 defends, F5 defends.
Okay, but what's wrong with
G6
F6?
defends. It doesn't really help you a lot.
Creates
it
a pin
weakens the diagonal
situation,
bit.
right? Let's say Queen B3. Now you're pinning it. How does Black respond?
Yeah.
I want you to
Okay,
observe
C6 is
that the Queen is
great.
also attacking B7.
Yeah, so the pin isn't deadly just yet. There's nothing to attack it right away.
Correct, yeah.
So Rook B8 would defend it
Rook
for
B8.
now.
Okay. So,
And this is also an unpleasant position. So f6 wouldn't have been my first choice.
Okay. So the defense is not easy.
But
Again, the difference is this, right? When you play with forcing moves, you're putting your opponent on the defensive. You're forcing him to do things he doesn't want to do. You're forcing him to play g6. You know, it's so hard for a strong player to play g6 here. He's thinking, when this pawn gets pushed, and here I can't take. When it gets there, it's dangerous. You with me?
Yeah. So that's why I was looking at an interesting move that at least like kinds of wrestles the attention away from your king a little bit is instead of g6 going f5.
Okay, f5. I
saying
mean,
that
I would reject f5 without even thinking, usually, because it's so wrong. So first of all, he opens this diagonal. Sorry, the light square diagonal.
Yeah.
So I would play something like queen b3.
Just king h8.
Okay. King h8. Queen b7. And this is not nice, right?
Yeah, it isn't. This pawn grabbing with the queen is probably what I overlooked, just like scanning it a bit.
Yeah.
Probably have to go rook e8 and milk the alec for what it's worth, but it's not concrete.
So after queen b3,
yeah, it's unpleasant.
Yeah, so going back, that's why he played this move, rook g3. Okay, so we are on rook g6. What do you do here? Because this looks like an opportunity. What are you playing for, and how do you go for it?
You don't have to exchange rooks. Like, you don't have to take immediately, because you can just take back with your queen. The e-pawn's still sitting there nicely defended. I would worry that there's some, like, if your queen takes back on g3, that the e-pawn's pinned because the rook's undefended. So that's something I'd just I'd keep an eye on while looking at other moves.
Okay.
But I guess everyone kind of, once you've been back rank mated once, everyone keeps an eye out for that.
Correct.
This is kind of, I don't really want to exchange, but if I find anything better to do, it's just a slight change in structure, even if it doesn't help. I don't see a move that does much more.
Okay.
Rook e3 would be nice because that kind of develops the rook, like a rook 1 to e3.
Very good. So
would
that's the
be
move
interesting because
that's the move that he finds.
Yeah.
Rook 1 to e3. So he realizes that the king has no defender. The king has got no defender. And he needs to bring 3 attackers towards that king. So that's why he goes rook e3, black goes rook e8.
Know how to attack. Not too many pieces left.
First he creates an escape square with h3, king f8, takes on g6. H takes.
Yeah.
Okay, so after h takes g6, it's white's turn to play. What do you do?
these are the types of positions I really don't enjoy. Because there's no obvious plan, like positional, like attack, like there's no attack on the queen side or like getting past pawn. There's nothing obvious to do.
Exactly.
Or, like, well, I mean, if we become experienced enough, maybe there will become an obvious thing to do. But it's kind of like positions like these where you kind of just go about exchanging the pieces and then trying to
and that's
see
why
what weaknesses are there.
That's why I'm showing this move f4 by terrifying. And f4 doesn't do anything in this position. If anything, your e4 pawn is very weak. So when you play f4 and your opponent plays g5, you're just weakening more this pawn.
Yeah. If anything, I think the e4 pawn is actually okay.
So f4,
if the rook behind it's defended, then the e pawn should be fine.
Yeah. Okay, but f4 would subject your position to weakness. What do you do here?
Okay, so the king side and the e pawn are kind of fine how they are. The only place that anything's going to really happen here is on the queen side. So black, like moving black's pawns around. Black doesn't want to play c5, so playing b4 to prevent any black's pawn moves isn't really going to work. a4 could be an idea, but black doesn't really like something is going to happen on the queen side, but I'm just trying to anticipate what exactly.
Okay, whoa. So again, you're doing that thing where you look at a move and you analyze it. What did I say?
Candidate moves.
Identify your candidate moves. Just say, in this position, I've got queen b4, I've got a4, I've got blah, 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 blah. And then, which one of these moves is the most forcing? And you start with that.
Queen b4, because...
If you understand this, you'll be able to find moves that the grandmasters find. That's the move that he played. And after queen b4, c6. He played queen a3.
Okay.
Okay, so why queen a3?
Okay, well, first of all, it attacks the a pawn, but also it kind of somehow positionally pins the d pawn so that if black ever tries to play d5, white can exchange queens in some way. And so white saying that,
multitasking move, right? He's attacking d6 and is pinning the queen, and on a7 is also impacting some pressure. So black is forced to play a6. I want you to notice something. Every time he's making pawn moves, what's happening in his position?
Weaknesses.
He's creating weaknesses. Now the dark squares are completely weak. Okay. So after a6, what do you do?
Rook d3 is the first move that comes to mind because that attacks the d pawn, but I can obviously see that that's just trading pawns.
Yeah, and that's the last thing you want to do, right? You don't want to trade pawns in a position like this.
So building on that idea, something like f3 to follow with rook d3 also comes to mind, but that seems to weaken my position rather than strengthen it.
Again, you're calculating before listing your candidate moves. It's a terrible habit because it will chow your time and it will make you think more.
But I always thought chess was a bit more complicated than that. Although I guess it's better just to spend the time calculating them one or two moves than looking at every move and seeing what it does.
Do you know what your biggest challenge is? You overthink things. You overthink them, so they become more complex. Chess is chess. It's just a game. It's not a mystery. You test things out. If they work, you do more of those. Make sense? So when you get a position like this, you want first of all to just identify what moves do you want to play here. And from those, you look at the most forcing moves. This position is very exciting. It's not as dull as it looks. People lose a lot in positions like this. What is white doing
e5 looks
successfully?
Annoying black's queen side pawns.
Exactly. He's been attacking something.
Or was this like this over the whole game or just now?
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, I'm just saying, in the last few moves, he's just been attacking weaknesses, and then black is forced to move them, creating more weaknesses. So now, if you recall, when we did our endgame lesson, we spoke about the type of weaknesses which exist in the endgame. And there were three of them: backward pawn, advanced pawn, and isolated pawn. And black has got one type in this position.
Backward
pawn. So in the end game, that's what you attack. How do you do it? Remember, when you attack weaknesses in the end game, it doesn't mean you will win them. The process of attack creates chances for you. So what do you do?
Queen a6 or queen a5 looks like it restricts it, but it just looks like it's putting the queen on a nice square, but it restricts black's b pawn a little bit, but that doesn't seem to do too much.
Okay, so again, we are back to the same thing which we've been saying. Don't analyze them, just list them. Just go queen a5 is one move, and queen this or this rook or whatever. Until the obvious ones are not there, until you can see obvious candidates move. But don't analyze them, just identify them. You with me?
Yeah.
Okay. What are they?
Queen a5, queen b4, queen b3.
Okay. So let's say you've got those three candidate moves. Which one is the most forcing?
Queen b4, because it keeps the pin on the d pawn somewhat, and it still allows you to play rook b3.
Is queen a5 better or queen b3 better than queen b4?
No.
Yeah. Then that's the move. That's really all there is to it. You see what I'm saying about overthinking things?
Yes.
Sometimes it's just simple. It's not complicated. Just literally do that. Like the one habit you need to get out of. I was looking at your games and I was seeing like the ideas you play for are very deep and very far, but you leave very obvious ideas on the surface because you're overthinking.
Yeah, Yeah, I can't help but feel like that sometimes after games.
Yeah, but you need to be able to do exactly what we're talking about here. Be able to list your candidate moves. And then once you've identified them, look for the most forcing. And this one fits in because it attacks both the weaknesses that are in this position.
Yes,
Right?
coach.
So after queen a3, a6, Lasker didn't play this move, queen b4. Instead, he played queen b3, which is not the best move, right? What I saw when you really dedicate yourself to practice, you start identifying stuff like easier, and it's less. So the more you understand, the easier things should become.
Yeah.
So after queen b3, he goes rook d8. What do you do?
Okay, so rook d8 is there to defend d6 and possibly d5. So you either want to restrict d5 if it's a threat, otherwise continue with going after the b pawn.
Okay. Well done for identifying his plan. Then what's your next step?
So the first move that kind of comes to mind is like queen b4 again. Queen b6 also looks nice just because it clamps down a bit more. C4 also comes with preventing d5. And so those are the three first moves that come to mind.
Okay. So which one do you choose? Which one is the most forcing? You suddenly see that when you look at it like this, there is a lot to consider in these positions. It's not as dour as it looks.
Yeah. I think it's a tough choice between queen b4 and queen b6, because I kind of discard c4 just because the queen and the rook are on the same file, so d5 right away isn't really necessary to stop it with a pawn just yet.
Okay.
So it's between queen b6 and queen b4. Queen b4 also prevents d5. Queen b6 prevents b5 as well as d5, so probably queen b6.
Okay. Lasker just shut down d5. There's not much to do in this position. You'll be able to get in all the moves you want, but the most forcing moves which prevents d5 is this move, c4. And another thing that might not be quite apparent here is that later white could play queen b4 and after f3 play rook b3, and b5 would then be a weak move because of this pawn on c4. So it's just thinking in futures, but he's also thinking about the end game. He's preparing. So c4, black goes rook d7. There is a concept that you find in a book called Dynamic Chess by Mihail Suba, that a perfect position, a position where you have the pieces in the right place, sometimes is a burden because you can't improve the pieces. You understand?
Yeah, I run into that once or twice, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah. So
you
the
seemingly
problem
have a
for
good
black
position,
is
then
that
nothing comes
most
from
of
it.
his pieces are on the right squares actually. So to improve the position by moving the pieces is just going to damage it.
Yeah.
Okay. So after rook d7, white goes queen d1. Queen goes to e5. And here, white goes queen g4. King goes to e8 because he was threatening the rook on d7. And all he is doing is checking for weaknesses. Queen e2, protecting his. And after king d8, queen d2 is now got an eye on that square. King c7. a3. Okay. So how do you increase the pressure? It's just played rook e7 and it's white's turn.
So for some reason, like, okay, I'll checks first, even if it doesn't work. It's just like part of looking for forcing moves. So b6 would drop the a6 pawn, so that we'd have to move the king. If king d7, then something like queen b6 looks annoying, so it would probably have to go to okay, so this check. I'm looking at some idea of the check combined with placing a rook on h8. That looks quite annoying to deal with, but there's no easy way to get the rook to h8.
Okay, but so what are you doing?
I'm on calculating.
You're calculating before you've
when I should just
your candidate moves.
Yeah.
This is the part, right? Because it's such a habit with the way you think, you do it all the time. This is the part where when they speak about discipline, where it was hard to learn certain things, this is the part. Where if you just iron out that one.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, not to mention that queen a5 immediately just drops the queen.
Exactly. That's the problem with calculating straight.
Okay.
So identify your candidate moves. People who blunder, they do that a lot. They look at a move and calculate.
Yeah. So.
And let me just explain another mechanism that's at work. When you think of a move that you want to play and you don't even calculate it, right? What happens is that your mind starts calculating and it's stuck in this move, right? It doesn't see certain obvious things about this move. But when you identify candidate moves, what happens is you see an idea, a5, okay, and a3 and queen b5, right? These are the different ideas. So what's happening with your attention is you're sticking it onto a position and removing it, and sticking it onto a different position and removing it, and sticking it onto a different position. By the time you come back to the first one, you have a new perspective on the position. So if there's something stupid that's obvious, you immediately pick it up. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so what are your candidates here?
Also struggling here a bit.
When we did the end game one, course one, we mentioned that the side which has the advantage can push pawns the side which does not have the advantage cannot push pawns.
Yeah, so I'm looking at b4 for that kind of reason, and also it makes sense because like the like just a general chess game goes that like in this type of position you'll most likely just push your queenside pawns and then basically trade off all the pawns, trade off all the pieces, and then draw if everything goes smoothly.
Yeah.
But it just so happens that his king is there, and also it forms.
You're calculating. Don't calculate.
Yeah.
Identify the move.
No, so b4 is the obvious one.
Mm-hmm.
It fits. I can't really fault it. I can't find many more moves other than b4.
Okay. So if b4 is the move you identify and you see like it's the only one really, then make it. And it's the correct move.
Ah, hooray.
Yeah. So b5 by white. So now what black is doing now is wrong. So the side in endgames, the side which has got the sort of a defect or the problems should not advance pawns like what he did now. So you take, because his king is very exposed, so you take, he takes, and here just goes g3. So the side with the advantage can afford to do this, but the side which is supposed to be defending should not do this. g5, king g2, rook e8, in d1, f6, in b3. So here Laska is just circling around. He sees that his opponent keeps advancing pawns and when he shouldn't be, so he allows it. I mean, sorry, Slater.
Yeah. Okay.
Goes queen b3, queen e6. It's a critical moment. What do you do here?
Okay, so exchanging and your king seems to have an easy path to the pawns, but there's no material difference yet, and there's still weaknesses. So keeping the queens on the board and declining the trade would make more sense.
Okay, so you have more space. So exchanging is going to be a disadvantage to you. So you cannot afford to exchange.
Yeah.
You go queen d1. And he goes rook h8. Okay, so rook h8, g4. So the side with advantage can afford to do this. In c4. And here, a4.
Okay, that never crossed my radar at all.
Okay, but why does he do it?
It opens up the opponent's king a bit, but it's still.
For you, it's speculative, right?
It's still trading pawns.
Okay, but now he's using the king position as these two pieces, as major pieces, can attack. So opening lines towards the queen, the king, makes a lot of sense. Queen takes b4. And some of these concepts, you have to see games. Once you've seen a game where this idea gets used, you're more likely to understand and appreciate it than if you've never seen it, right?
Of course.
Okay. So after queen b5, rook b3. The follow-up is quite obvious. Rook b3. And he goes queen a6, defending everything. Okay. So now he goes queen d4. Rook e8. Rook b1. He's planning to play just rook a1 and rook a7. And this is the problem of the king position. So rook e5. So his idea is he would be able to trade. And here, Slater makes a blunder. Queen b4. What do you do? If you are black, this is a terrible blunder. It's
if I were black,
blunder, yeah.
I would play rook b5.
Okay, so if you went rook b5, this would be a mistake because of queen c4. And suddenly he's got access there. You can't take. Okay, so
Yeah. Okay.
the correct move is queen b5.
Okay, that's a more refined version.
Yeah. So the point is this, right? If you play queen e1, then after queen d3, it's very difficult. Fun enough, just for because e4 is now a problem. And moves like f3 would be terribly wrong, because now you can play rook b5 and you can't avoid and allow him to play this move. So he played queen b5, fun enough. And after queen e1, he went queen d3 and Lasker went Schlechter went rook b4. I'm so used to seeing Lasker winning.
Yeah.
c5, rook a4, c4, queen a1, queen takes on e4 check, queen h2,
This looks a bit risky.
and then he goes rook b5. And again, this rook b5 is a mistake. The problem with this position is now, because of the way, the nature of the position having been changed, it's now very highly tactical. And the king position of black and the king position of white makes static decisions almost impossible. So here, first white goes queen a2. Now if you push here, then rook c4, rook a is sort of skewering the queen. There's good no time for that.
Yeah.
So after queen a2, he goes check. And after king g1, he goes check. King goes here. And here he could have actually have managed to go perpetual. But no, he wanted to win, so he went d5. And you can see that he's clearly better here. White goes rook a8. Black goes queen b4. King g2. He goes queen c5. Maybe it was better to just put a defense here with rook to b7. But now queen a6, now is threatening a rook check. Just one move of lacking attention, this queen c5. And the queen gets into the DMs of the king. So after queen a6, he goes rook b8. White goes check. king d8, and now rook g7. Just threatening that check. Okay, so after rook g7, he goes queen b6. What do you do? Anyone in the chat who can spot the move, please feel free.
This is the tough one. Queen a4 or rook g8 the two moves I'd look at just to avoid giving up the queen. Oh, sorry, not giving up, but trading.
Okay. There's a winning move here. Like an absolutely winning move, not even like a trade or anything like that.
And if we take on b6, that doesn't help.
Very, very good. There is very sharp on tactics. Queen a3.
Ah, a3.
Yeah.
Ah.
The point is that, right? After queen b4, there's queen a7. You with me?
Yeah.
And you can't defend. So after queen a3, you went king c8, and this is a blunder. Right? The point is that now after queen f8 check, queen d8, there is queen c5, and you can't defend. So
yeah,
there you go. So if you look at this position, for you, I think the reason why you struggle with this position is your calculation is bad. Not that you can't calculate, but it's not organized. That's all.
Yeah.
So you spend a lot of energy
I agree.
on stuff that you shouldn't be spending a lot of energy. And if you sort that out, like, and this is the exercise, right? So you take positions in magazines and wherever the positions are, and you just list out the candidate moves. You don't calculate them, just list out. And then afterwards, look for the one which is the most forcing. If that works, you don't even have to calculate the other ones.
Yeah.
All right?
I look forward to trying that.
Okay, good. All right, let's end off.
See a change in the rating.
Thank you so much for joining us, guys. Today we've got only not much people, so it would be pointless to rate, but we'll see tomorrow. Okay.
Thank you, Coach.
All right. Stay on the line, Hugo. And guys,
Okay.
I'll see you later. I think I might jump in later.